Good morrow, friend. Sport coats or blazers or jackets are one of my all-time favorite wardrobe staple pieces to mess with. I think it's because you can make them out of anything, you can deconstruct them to your heart's desire, and as long as they have some sort of lapel situation and a squared off shoulder, they will always read as a jacket. So yes, let's do all of that and some of this as well. Oh, and yes, one of my SD cards, shockingly, for the first time ever, has gone bad. So I lost about a quarter of the footage for this, but it's fine. We'll get through it. We persevere. Let's do this. This jacket was given to me specifically to dissect. I love it when friends speak my love language, and I had a lot of fun exploring the tailoring codes that are at play here. I liked the silhouette so much, I began taking measurements to draft a pattern, before realizing I hate drafting patterns, so I rooted through my vintage patterns and found this lovely lady. I think of the copious jacket patterns I have, this one is the one that just says quintessential jacket to me. All the better to mess with. I've also come across a lot of these tapestry-style blankets at the bins lately. Of course, I love that they're a throwback, I'm sorry, pun very much intended, to medieval tapestries. And while this fabric is a bit thick for a modern jacket, that's never stopped me before. I really wish I still had footage of the actual blanket. It had writing on it that said, "Everything I am or ever will be, I owe to my angel mother," which was probably meant as a lovely, heartfelt sentiment, but sounded kind of dark and ominous to me. It also had a bouquet of roses tied with a ribbon in the center with a blue and white striped background with pink hearts. I cut the pattern from the blanket, paying close attention to where the different elements of the motif hit. This is the front panel of the jacket. Now that I'm looking at it, this is so cutesy and sweetsy, and I just don't think it's me, even in an ironic way. Anyway, so I'm thinking that I'm going to actually flip it around like this and wear it inverted, which means that the letters will be inverted. It's not inverted here because you're seeing the mirror image of it, but it will be inverted, but I'm actually kind of fine with that. This is where we are so far in the development process, just making these sorts of decisions. I stitched the 4 fisheye darts at the front of the blazer from the center to the points. I stitched the bust darts. I cut panels of horsehair interfacing to support the front of the jacket. The panel cut away around the fisheye darts, so I didn't have to worry about those. And I overlapped the bust darts and stitched to keep them as flat as possible. I cut a shoulder panel from the bias of the horsehair canvas and stitched it to the main canvas panel in rows 1 inch apart. If you're curious what this actually looks like, my Poor Things coat video's footage is marvelously complete, and the steps are almost exactly the same. I pad stitched every other row to the inside of the jacket, with 1 row of pad stitching going all the way down to the hem to keep the panel in place. I pad stitched the very small lapel in rows 3/4 of an inch apart and then 1/4 of an inch apart. I attached a twill tape to the roll line of the lapel with a catch stitch. Mind you, this should be tailor's tape, which twill tape is not, but twill tape is what I had. This was eased. I then pinned my ersatz tailor's tape just inside the seam allowance around the front edge of the jacket. This got a little chonky at the curves. I permanently basted the tape along one side, then the other. I folded the lapel into position to ensure the tape gave enough ease for it to fold. I caught stitched the edges of the canvas to make sure it was supporting the jacket front as much as possible. I pressed the fold into the lapel, supported by a wet, rolled towel, and left it overnight to set the fold. In the meantime, I stitched the back neck darts and matched the 2 back panels along center back right sides together. I cut a backstay from good, sturdy muslin and pinked the bottom edge. I overlapped the darts as I had the front canvas and the center back seam. I placed this along the back neckline, wrong sides together. I stay-stitched the back neckline and armholes. I pinned the front and back shoulders together, right sides together, and cut 2 pieces of twill tape the exact length of the shoulder, then put a pin in the tape at 1/4 inch, and used that as a guide to pin the tape to the shoulder seam. I stitched through all layers, easing the fabric to fit the tape. Of course, these seams were absolutely massive, so I fell-stitched the seam allowance open just to make sure they were as flat as possible. I cut the front lapel facing from a contrasting cotton canvas. Using the blanket as a facing would have been way too thick, plus I did not have enough of it. I had also cut a back neck facing and the undercollar from the same canvas. I matched the back neck facing to the lapel facings at the shoulder, right sides together, and hand-stitched because I did not want to change the thread color in my machine. I stay-stitched the neckline with, who cares if it's contrasting, it's going to be on the inside anyway, black thread. Apparently I was very proud that I notched the collar point. I had cut the upper collar from the blanket. I had to cut it in 2 pieces, so I stitched it right sides together at center back and felled the seam allowances open. I matched the center back seams of the bottom of the upper collar and the top of the back neckline facing right sides together, and very messily eased the collar into the back neckline. This is always a struggle for me, but it always turns out okay, so I stitched the upper collar in place. I cut the undercollar from the cotton canvas on the bias and pad stitched the horsehair canvas to the wrong side. Funnily enough, I did retrieve this footage, but this is what I filmed. It happens. I trimmed away the seam allowance of the canvas. I pinned the undercollar to the neckline of the jacket, right sides together, and stitched. I matched the upper and under collars along the outer edges, right sides together, along with the rest of the front lapel facings. I stitched this all in place from one edge of the facing, around the collar to the other edge of the facing. I trimmed all the corners and snipped relief triangles into the curves and flipped the whole facing collar combo right side out. You can easily make or break a jacket's tailoring in the pressing, so I took my time pressing the edges, rolling them when necessary, and used my wooden clapper, which is totally a professional tailoring tool and not my kid's wooden block. I let everything cool overnight, then prick stitched the edges to make sure the edges stayed as crisp as possible with this springy fabric. We are at the point where we need to start considering pockets. I've cut the pocket flaps out. I think that this visually needs a pocket flap, if only because that is something that visually cues jacket. I've decided I want the fabric to be facing right side out. I think that it's a nice little juxtaposed moment there. But what kind of pocket to do? In theory, you would do a double welt pocket and then kind of have the flap coming out of the top welt. A couple of issues with that. Number one, I have none of this fabric left. I used like every scrap of it except for the fringe for this jacket, which is great and efficient, but it means I don't have anything left to cut a welt from. So I would have to cut the welt from this twill, which would mean that there would be like a nice little contrasting moment there, which I don't love with this. Like I like that the contrast is there, you know, that's like the inside of the garment peeking out, but I don't necessarily want like another contrast moment right there. So that's problem number one. I could easily solve that problem by not doing the top welt. I've seen plenty of pockets that just have the pocket flap coming out of the fabric right here without the top welt, and then they have a bottom welt, and then if I had the contrasting bottom welt, it would be hidden by the pocket flap. So not the end of the world. I could definitely navigate around that. But, and here's the bigger issue, I feel like it's kind of weird to have a functional pocket right here given the changes that I'm making to this jacket. This is a 3-panel jacket. There's the front, back, but then there's also a side panel, and I have not cut that. Number one, I didn't have the fabric for it. Really, we are using every scrap of this fabric. Two, I just kind of like the idea of making this more of a deconstructed kind of interesting thing. I think that we've all seen so many garments made from this kind of fabric. I think that bringing something new to the conversation is necessary. Also, you know, this is a purchased pattern. It's not that I'm against using a purchased off the peg pattern, but I feel like if I'm going to present this as my design, then I need to do something besides just make it out of an interesting fabric. I need to add something to the design in some way, and I think I want to do that by having the side panel be open. I think that that's an interesting thing. And then right here where the sleeve comes, I'm going to add little ties so that it ties together. I think that there's something kind of interesting happening there from a historical perspective. There are a lot of garments throughout history that tie at the sides like that. I think that that gives it the option to have kind of like a hanging sleeve moment, which will also be a cool historical nod. That's my timer. So I gotta go, I'll be back. The joke with me is that I'm always doing at least 5 things at once, so I also have some completely unrelated garments dyeing in the other room because I'm messy and so I get stains on stuff and then I have to over dye them. Anyway, that's a side note. So back to this. Okay, so because there's not going to be necessarily a side seam on this, this is going to have a front flap and a back flap, I'm afraid that having a functional pocket here would be kind of weird. I don't know, it just puts extra bulk in here. This is already a bulky thing. It's not like I could actually use this pocket for anything. If I actually put anything in there, I could put a cell phone in there, but then again, because there's not that side seam connection, it would just kind of be flopping along as I walk. Ask me how I know. So I'm thinking that maybe I just want to make this a faux pocket. Please forgive me. I know I hate faux pockets and things. I think it is so pointless. But given all of the other circumstances for this, I really think a faux pocket is what we're gonna have to do here. That's just how it's gonna be. So I'm gonna line this and then just kind of attach it where a pocket would go. Don't hate me. I matched them with muslin lining right sides together, stitched and cut relief triangles around the corners, flipped them right side out, pressed and matched them to the jacket front at right around the center of the fisheye darts. Oh no, too bulky. That's better. Black twill tape was a less obvious contrast than the cream canvas would have been at least. I made sure not to catch the lapel facing and stitched them in place. I placed the black twill tape over the seam, raw ends tucked in, and edge stitched around the twill tape. The sleeves are 2-piece sleeves, so I matched the pieces right sides together. There's a part of that strange message. I was referencing hanging sleeves of the Elizabethan period, so I played around with openings in the sleeve seam and made some decisions. I stitched the sleeve seams from the vent up, then around the side seam opening. I stitched not 2, but 3 lines of ease stitches at the sleeve cap at 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 3/8 of an inch. I pulled the ease stitch tails to form the sleeve cap. I eased the sleeve cap into the armscye, matching the notches. I stitched the sleeve in place. Y'all have likely surmised I'm not a huge fan of shoulder pads, but jackets do need some shoulder reinforcement. Luckily, I had these modest shoulder pads I had harvested from a Laura Ashley sailor dress that definitely didn't need them. I permanently tacked them in place along the shoulder seam with the edge of the pad protruding about a seam allowance amount over the shoulder edge. I permanently tacked the outer edge of the pad. I needed reinforcement at the top of the undersleeve to stop the sleeve from folding and bunching up under the arm. I cut the reinforcement from horsehair canvas and stitched it into the sleeve seams, and fell stitched it to the underarm. Okay, time to prep the jacket for the lining. I trimmed away all excess fabric from where the facing met the hem, which is turned up at 1.5 inches, and pressed. I permanently basted a 1.5 inch bias strip of horsehair canvas to the inside of the hem, turned the hem up over the strip, and permanently basted the hem in place. The bottom little bit of the facing will remain raw, so I fell stitched it down to keep it intact. I did the same for the back panel hem and the sleeve hems. I mitered the vent edges of the sleeve vent by notching where the vent and sleeve hem turn-ups met, marking the space between them, then folding and stitching the line and cutting away the excess fabric at the top. I basted strips to the edges of the sleeve seam opening. Finally, I folded open the lapel facing and slip-stitched the roll line facing to the roll line tape. I cut the body of the lining from the same high-quality muslin I'd cut the backstay from. I stitched all the seams and darts. I matched the completed lining to the facing right sides together. I stitched the lining to the facing on the machine. I'm usually in the hand-stitched jacket lining club, but let's face it, there was more than enough hand-stitching in this thing. I pressed the edges from the right side. The hem lining gets a little fold that goes down over the hem, so I folded the seam allowance of the lining inward, matched it to the seam allowance of the hem turn-up, and fell-stitched the lining seam allowance fold. Cotton lining at the sleeve would cause too much friction if I ever wear this thing with a long-sleeved shirt, so I cut the sleeve lining from a slightly slicker pink silk. I stitched the seams of the sleeve lining and gave the cap its ease stitches, just the 2 rows this time. I shoved the lining into the sleeve, wrong sides together, and matched everything up. I pinned the sleeve cap lining to the main body lining and fell-stitched it in place. I bound the open underarm edge of the sleeve in black twill tape. I laid black twill tape over the right side of the open side seams, edge-stitched, then folded the tape to the inside and fell-stitched the other edge in place. I let the twill tape extend past the hem because drama. I basted the sleeve seam openings lining to the self and used a similar twill tape method to finish the inner edges. I encased the raw inner edge of the sleeve vent with twill tape and finished the sleeve hem as I had finished the main body hem. I have obtained many knitting machines from estate sales, and with them there is always, every single time, at least one holiday tin full of sewing notions. I love that these treasures were carefully put away by someone, and I try to use these items with respect to honor their original owner. This tin happened to be full of various gold buttons. These gold buttons are all mismatched, but some of them have these ER crests. Elizabeth Regina. Perfect, no? I stitched 4 of the larger buttons, all mismatched, to the front edge of the jacket, and 4 smaller buttons to each of the sleeve vents. Okay, so the jacket is pretty much done. I really hate to do this, but I'm going to put a pin in making the buttonholes to go on this side of the jacket. I currently have 2 buttonhole makers. One of them is my domestic Genome machine, and the other is me. Both of those have proven unreliable in the past, so I am going to hold off until I have access to a more reliable buttonhole maker. I think I may have access to one pretty soon, actually, so we'll just put a pin in that. Other than that, she's done. I originally intended this to go over the red and pink corset and skirt set I recently made. But I think the moment I decided to flip the fabric, that plan changed. And that is fashion. It's not about making a plan and executing it, it's about working through ideas and letting them become what they need to become. This will get a permanent collection pairing, and so will the corset skirt set, but that will happen when it happens. We have turned to the dark side of the collection, literally with this jacket, and we're going to stay on that track for the next couple of pieces. Strap yourselves in, kids. I've been flirting with goth up until now, but we are diving in headfirst. If you enjoyed this video, I always appreciate a thumbs up, and hit subscribe if you find yourself drawn to the dark side. Bye!